days at the Big A this year are dwindling down to a precious few as we are at the penultimate Sunday here at Aqueduct. As Richard Migliore and Andy Serling as we tape this week's National Racing Report. There's a lot of excitement heading towards the Kentucky Derby, but we did have a race that caught a lot of national attention yesterday.
Well, probably the best horse in North America went down in defeat yesterday, and honestly, I thought he was vulnerable going into the race. He's a horse that's shown that he doesn't really run turns as well, and then he goes to a place where he has to run around 3 turns.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard situation as we head to the Charlestown Classic down at Charlestown in West Virginia, because neither one of us wants to say after the race, well, they shouldn't have run him. But I'll tell you something, and we'll get to that. You knew something was amiss right away, and the announcer, who made a lot of bad mistakes, including not being able to pronounce Cornelia Velasquez's name correctly, he didn't even notice that Shared Belief, the 1-5 favorite, didn't break.
Yeah, well, and you could see he came back like he had stumbled. You couldn't see because he was between horses, but obviously something had happened. And I thought the key to Moreno's victory, and we'll get back to Shared Belief, obviously, was Cornelia Velasquez being able to come out running when Warrior of the Roses, a hopeless long shot, was going to lead with Travis Dunkelberger. He was able to back off, but he had spread the field out far enough. Now he's laying second and basically in control of the race.
No question about it. And the fact that Moreno is maturing and learning to rate a little bit off horses in that situation, and they were going racehorse time up front, but the fact that Moreno can do that, he's a very good horse, and you hate to see that Moreno gets completely lost in the shuffle of the relative debacle with Shared Belief. But at this point, Mike Smith is basically pulling up Shared Belief.
Well, you could see, you just caught a little glimpse of the back of the field. Mike Smith was already riding him into that second turn, and then he pulled him up. Obviously, he felt something amiss, and it underscores again how important starts are when a horse slips behind. Now, the report is, and I'm sure more will come out over the next few days, is that he kind of pulled a stifle, which isn't a big deal.
What exactly is it?
Well, I don't really know how we put into human terms, but basically it's like pulling a muscle, or that stifle joint kind of gets out of place, and eventually it'll go back in, but now everything is strained and sore, and obviously Mike felt he wasn't good behind. Now, that would make sense to me that he has issues behind to begin with, because he never runs turns well to begin with on a mile track.
Yeah, and you think how he was heading to Belmont Park, a track that was built for Shared Belief, where he could run a 1-turn mile or even a 1-turn mile and 1/8, and obviously that would help him. It's unlikely we'll see him in the Met Mile after this situation. Mike did the right thing pulling him up. But there's a lot of things I wanted to ask you about this. One thing you saw, and here's the start. I don't know what really happened here. It felt like Richie took himself out of the race.
Well, I think he slipped behind. You see right there, he kind of bellies down. He doesn't stumble conventionally where your horse, his head will drop down, his hind end drop down. And now he's struggling to pull himself forward. A horse doesn't get his power from his front. He gets his power from his hind end. He doesn't drag himself. He pushes himself. Once he lost his hind end like that, he basically had to drag himself back to his feet. And now he was injured. There was just nothing left.
He also never looked comfortable to me. Now, I'm not, the greatest expert on horses that are sort of in some kind of distress in a race, but I noticed around the second turn as they went around, you caught him, he was turning his head to the right. And it seemed to me like right then I thought, this horse, there's something not right about this.
Yeah, well, he was struggling, and Mike was trying to get him in the race and give him every opportunity to find his stride, because sometimes horses will sort themselves out. But obviously, once they got to the backstretch and he switched back to his right lead, Mike said, wait a second, he's not right. I've got to take care of him. And sometimes being proactive in those situations keeps things from getting too far down the line where they're a catastrophic injury. Hopefully this is just something, a little bit of time. He'll be back before the end of the year.
And it's always better to err on the side of caution, because essentially he wasn't going to win this race. He wasn't going to fill out the superfecta. He wasn't running in this race. So Mike did what he did to not only protect the horse, but he didn't do it at the expense of the public that's betting, and that's a very, very important factor. And with Shared Belief, he's too good a horse for this to be the way for him to go out. So you hope that it's just a minor injury and he's going to be able to come back sooner than later, because he's run too many good races. You'd hate to think this is the last race we see him.
Yeah, no athlete wants to go out on a sour note, and horses included in their connections. The fact that he's a gelding and they can give him as much time as they need to for him to recover from this, it isn't a life-threatening injury. It's not really even a career-threatening injury. It just was unfortunate it happened on the day.
Yeah, and it's obviously disappointing for us, I mean, selfishly, because we're also looking forward to seeing him in the Met Mile. And the Met Mile is going to be a great race with or without Shared Belief, as there happen to be quite a few good horses around this year. And you wonder if some people that were on the fence about different races might think, well, if Shared Belief isn't running, that makes it much more likely that I'm going to run in the race. maybe he comes, but it's hard to imagine just another 7 weeks from now.
I would be surprised. It's not impossible. I would be surprised. But like you said, that's the negative. The positive is it could open up for more horses in a bigger field.
Well, it's funny about this race, the Charlestown Classic. We will move on. You know, people talked about the field in Moreno. Well, it turns out if Shared Belief hadn't run there, I think it might have been an even stronger race. But consider the race that Moreno ran. I don't know who's going to beat him.
No, Moreno ran terrific, and the fact that he was able to sit outside second and then finish the deal, because he has won from just off the pace before, but his best races has been when he dictates the tempo completely. And let's give a little bit of credit to Imperative, who seems to really like Charlestown.
Apparently he does. I guess he'll be back. They'll be pointing him to next year's Charlestown Classic. And Moreno, I think his winner share is around $1 million, so he's at the $3 million mark, and this is a horse that won our Whitney last year. Before we go to break, and there he, of course, is in the winner's circle, with his rider, who somebody, and there's Eric Io, needs to tell the track announcer. His name is Cornelio Velasquez. He's won enough races. He's been one of the leading riders in this country. I think he called him Cornelio Vasquez. And we talked about this on Twitter, and more than a few people heard this. I think Cornelio has earned the respect to have his name pronounced correctly, especially when he wins their $1.5 million race.
Yeah, and actually had some success earlier in the card,
right.
too.
Wasn't his first time in the winner's circle, right. He had a dress rehearsal.
Yeah,
that stuff just gets on. I think you should get people's names right. And listen, we make mistakes, too. But, I mean, this is a $1.5 million race. A grade 2, by the way, not a grade 3, like he said as they were going to the gate. Now we'll turn our attention to the Big A, now they've gotten all that off my chest, to the Distaff Handicap. And I tell you what, it's nice to see La Verdad back, Richie.
And she's back in a good way. She really just looked tremendous in the paddock, although carrying a little more weight than I think she normally does, which bodes well for her going forward, because I even spoke with Linda Rice at the race, and she said, I had her fit enough to run, but I didn't have her as fit as she can be.
Well, that's not going to be good news for some of the other sprinters around here, because he actually relaxed her on the lead, and she went 22-1. And she was engaged, and I like the fact that Junior came after with Air of Distinction here. Air of Distinction didn't seem to take the turn very well. Hopefully she's okay. She finished a distant 4th in here. She's only beaten about 10 or so, 15 lengths. But this La Verdad, I mean, this is a monster performance.
Yeah, this is just a jaw-dropping performance, I should say. The thing about her that's so impressive, she's going fast here. I mean, 44 and change, and she doesn't look like she's going fast.
No, she really doesn't, Richie. I said the same thing. It's funny, when I watched the replay last night, so I didn't see the race live, I said, I bet this wasn't that fast a race. But, I mean, she was moving out there. 44-4, that's racetrack time. I think Jose had to get after a little bit to keep her mind in the game, but it's a good start for her this year.
Yeah, it's a really good start for her, and you hope that she stays good into the time of year when the Breeders' Cup rolls around, race, you know, at Keeneland, because...
Could she go 7?
You know what? I think she can this year. She has a little different look to me this year. And the fact that he was able to get her to back off and be head-and-head with Air of Distinction, I really think in some ways she rated yesterday. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to see her behind horses,
right,
but I think she's a little different than she was last year.
Well, I'll tell you something we did learn from last year. You got to let her run. You can't let her sit behind horses. She wants to run. And listen, the Ballerina is a grade 1 at Saratoga at 7 furlongs. It's a good race for Linda to find out. If she can't get the 7 in that race, she's not getting the Breeders' Cup. But if she doesn't there, she may be able to get it done.
Yeah, but I do think she's changed enough where I think she will go a little further this year than she was capable of last year.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Whatever it is, we're glad to have her back. We've got a lot more to look forward to in this card. We're going to head down to Pimlico and take a look at a trio of stakes there before heading out west, before then going and looking at a recap of last week at Keeneland. A lot more to come on the National Racing Report. Tell you what, Richie, we're a week away from getting back to Belmont Park. They're working on those train tracks to revamp them. Can't wait.
Oh, it's going to be great. And just when the weather gets good, we get to go to the Taj Mahal of thoroughbred racing.
No, I mean, it is always so exciting to get back to Belmont Park. And I can think back to moving to New York. Of course, you've been riding at Belmont for so many years. But, you know, I came almost every opening day in the spring. And just the feeling of walking into Belmont Park when we open up in the spring is such a great time. There's so much anticipation for all the good things that are going to happen going forward.
I always liked when I'd walk to the jockey's room opening day and you'd come up the ramp at Belmont. And then you look out and see that turf course. It felt like the first time I ever went to Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, it really is an exciting place. And for those of us that love horse racing, and Richie and I share that love of horse racing, there's no greater place than Belmont, and there's no better day than opening day at Belmont. That's just a week from this coming Wednesday, April 29th. We will head down to Pimlico, which will be the focus of the racing world in just a few weeks when the Preakness is down there. But there was a prep there in the Federico Tessio. The winner, I thought, Bonavista ran very gamely. 2 all hands. Once again, this horse won by bottoming out the field last time at Aqueduct. Why didn't they just send this horse the lead?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think the winner actually did just that.
But because he was unaggressive with all hands.
Well, and we're going to see that in a couple other spots we're going to talk about. What's wrong with being aggressive? What's wrong with speed?
Richie, I just don't get it. Obviously, one of the best things about your skills was riding speed horses. But if you're on a speed horse, you could put yourself in a position to dictate the race, as Bonavista did here, because of the unaggressive ride on all hands. If you're coming from behind, you're having others dictate to you.
Well, exactly. And I've always said this. I'd rather make an aggressive mistake than be passive and have basically become a victim. And that's what basically happened to me, in my mind, all hands. Put the horse in the game.
I agree. And listen, maybe he wasn't going to run his race anyway. He certainly didn't finish particularly well. But coming off the kind of win he had, I'm just surprised they... And it wasn't as though they got him to settle outside of horses. He was restraining them inside of the other horses in a slow pace. Maybe he didn't have it, but let a speed horse do what he does well.
Yeah, and Pimlico generally tends to be good for inside speed. Not always, but generally speaking. And Trevor McCarthy, I think all of his skills were on display there. This is a kid that can really ride, looks exactly like his father, who was a tall guy, Mike McCarthy, and he looks like him, but he finished really strong on this horse.
No, he did, and the other horse just couldn't get by him in the stretch. It looked like he was going to beat him, and that's noteworthy peach. But Bonavista, I'm not sure that he's a Preakness-type horse, but he did get the job done in this race as we head to the turf at Pimlico. And we look at the Henry S. Clark, one of 2 races we look at the turf that Abel Escano got beaten a nose in. I thought this horse, he's the gray between horses. I thought Abel did a pretty good job, and he kind of hung to a horse that found more coming inside.
It seemed to me from the sample of races I watched from Pimlico, the turf course is playing to horses that have position. I don't think you want the real deep close. I just think they're taking the worst of it. And I agree with you. He did a good job saving ground, and it looked like right here he has to win.
Oh, my
He
gosh.
looms up, and the races should be over, you feel like, and then this horse on the inside battles back, or does he pull up?
I'm not sure. I couldn't quite tell watching it, Richie. That's Talk Show Man, the 7-5 favorite, beating Paris Vegas, who was 6-1. It's weird with Talk Show Man, who's in those green and yellow silks, because he seemed to be idling behind horses, and I wonder if he sort of got a little bit energized when he went down to the inside.
And saw that empty space, the daylight, and there you got Xavier Perez. He's easy to pick out with those white gloves. It's like his signature, right?
Well, he gets it done on the inside. It's funny, when I watched this the first time, I wasn't sure who won it, actually. It was quite a head bob. A tough beat if you had Paris Vegas at 6-1, but Talk Show Man gets it done at 7-5, and we'll probably see some of these horses in the Dixie on Preakness weekend. Now, this race that we'll watch, we like Nellie Cashman, who gets a very, very nice ride in here by Forrest Boyce. This is the Dahlia, and Dahlia is a horse I want to talk about with you for a minute when we're done here. But, man, the horse who was second to last in the far outside, Run for the River, this horse was 4 wide every inch of the way, if not wider. And this is a brutal beat.
Yeah, a very tough beat. I think a few things about it. Obviously, the post position didn't help.
Yeah,
her.
it doomed her. I agree.
And sometimes the riders just dealt a bad hand. And the fact that you're riding for Shug McGahee, do you think that lends itself like, well, I don't want to take a chance and get stopped? Maybe there's more pressure involved on a rider that doesn't get those kind of opportunities.
Maybe that's the case, Richie. Those are all relevant and interesting points. And, once again, Nellie Cashman has that speed. Forrest Boyce used it well, put her in perfect position the whole way, and she guts it out. Because right here, man, wide trip or not, Run for the River is going right by.
Well, it looks like it, but, think back when Nellie Cashman was disqualified in Saratoga a couple of summers ago. She got the lead, and I thought she was pulling up, and Forrest Boyce went left-handed, and she did come out and bump the other horse, and it was a legitimate takedown.
Right.
But I think she kind of reasserted herself, and when she hit the front here, it looks to me like she started to pull up, and then when she feels the oncoming Run of the River, kind of reasserted herself as well. My one beef with Abel Castellano's ride is Run of the River was running so much from the whip, and a lot of times fillies and mares don't, but every time he hit her, she surged. Why did he stop hitting her? I'm not a big, defender of, like, I don't want to see guys beating up on horses, but when you're getting a positive response by going to the whip, why would you stop going to it?
Well, that's a very, very good question, and one I can't answer. But obviously it didn't work out, whatever the case was. And maybe it's a combination of Nellie Cashman finding more. Maybe it's a case of Run for the River not continuing her rally. But if you looked at this and there's no Trackist down there, I guarantee she covered a lot more feet than Nellie Cashman with, whatever you look at, a tough beat.
Yeah, a tough beat, but I'm just curious. You wanted to talk about Dahlia. I was such a crazy race fan. I actually tape recorded the call of her Washington, D.C. International. I think it was like 75 or 70.
I think.
Oh,
no,
was it
I feel like she won it the year before Secretariat.
Yeah, you know what? You may be right. I just remember in the 70s, tape recording the call of the race.
Wow, yeah. She was, it's funny because I had mistakenly said on Twitter this race was run at Pimlico, and I said to somebody, well, I was probably thinking of Laurel because Dahlia won the now finished Washington D.C. International, which really, and I bet you agree, was one of the great races we ran all year.
Well, especially in that point of time, because racing wasn't as international in the sense that you didn't ship horses around as easily. It's become a much smaller place, the world, because horses do go all over the world now.
Yeah, and you know, I really feel as though that's one race that got a raw deal from the Breeders' Cup, because it felt like the Breeders' Cup came in on their coattails. The next thing you know, the Washington, D.C. International didn't exist anymore, but it was the race, as you pointed out, that helped bring horses to this country, along with the Canadian International run up in Canada, but that's North America. And it's a race that just got lost. It was such an important race in the composure of American racing.
It really was, and you wish there was somehow some way to bring it back, some time of the year it would fit, but it probably wouldn't.
And for those that don't remember this happening, all along when the Arc de Triomphe over in France came over and won the Canadian International, the Washington, D.C. International, our Turf Classic, all in a space of 6 or 7 weeks back in 1984 on the way to becoming, or 83 on the way to becoming Horse of the Year, a kind of performance with Patrick Biancone, a very young, slimmer Patrick Biancone, you'll never see again.
Very good.
So we'll head out to California, where Patrick Biancone actually is. I saw him when we were out there. And I thought that this was an exceptional ride by Drayden Van Dyke on the horse in red, the 4. Saved ground on the turn, and unlike the horse who finishes third, 3 Heart, where Taylor Bays unwisely tried to go through on the inside in the stretch before angling out, not that she was going to win, this was a very, very confident ride.
It was a very confident ride. I love the way he threaded his way through traffic. And I think this underscores how important momentum is. I think 3 Hearts would have been a lot closer. I don't know if she would have won, but she had to steady at a critical point while the other filly had a full head of steam. And then she tried to join in that run, but horses aren't cars.
It's hard to regather yourself like that.
Much harder.
Yeah.
And if maybe Tyler had been a little bit more patient and waited, because it seems like horses spread the turn and come right back over at Santa Anita, wait until they make that move and then come out.
Well, I think it was a very interesting contrast between one horse who had her momentum stopped by trying to go inside like that, and another horse who kept running smoothly, and she never lost her momentum, and in fact could gather her momentum, while the other horse had to regather herself. And as you know, regathering yourself when the other horse is a full head of steam, a hard thing to do. Yeah. We're coming up on our next break. We're going to come back with a lot of good action from last week at Keeneland. Well, welcome back to the last segment of the National Racing Report. And, you know, Keeneland has so many interesting races throughout the week, and we didn't want to lose sight of some races run last weekend, but we'll start out with yesterday's Elkhorn Stakes. And I'll tell you something, Richie, this was one of the more entertaining races to watch the entire week, because they went a 52 and 2 half, but then these two hooked up, and they actually went the next half mile in 48 and 1.
Yeah, well, and you could see the separation on the field. And I got to tell you, from a jockey's perspective, and you could see Joe Bravo is really in the dashboard, trying to restrain his horse off the gray horse on the lead. When you look back and you see that much separation in the field, right there you're going, man, I messed this up big time.
You know, I'll tell you something, and I know the horse won, but it felt like Joe had no choice with the 1, because that horse was running off on him, and I thought he did a darn good job, even if he had lost, trying to rein him in.
Well, he did a really good job, and it was the horse.
He looks pretty relaxed here compared to where he was.
Well, when he got down, when he just turned on the backside, Joe was really in the dashboard trying to see if he could get him back off of that horse. And when he realized, you know what, this isn't working, and I'm going to use this horse's energy up fighting with him, I'm just going to put my hands down and try to nurse him along. He did a tremendous job. Now, if he'd have got beat, he would have got criticized, but you and I are seeing it exactly the same way. He did the best he could under the circumstances, and with his horse being uncooperative.
If this horse had finished 4th, I would have said the same thing. First of all, he's a 30-to-1 long shot. The far and away rank outsider in the field. I mean, he just could have fought him. And I'll tell you something. It's amazing that he holds on. And frankly, the other horse holds on for a long time as well.
He really did. He hung in well inside the 8th pole. This started looking a little bit like Bold Forbes' Belmont with great contractor coming on, and right. I mean,
and Mackenzie Bridge
and
as
Mackenzie
well.
Bridge, and he was staggering to the line. But good to see Joe get this win. And again, this is one of those cases where he won, so all's right in the world. You and I, watching the race, understand that even if he got beat, he did the best he could with the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, you can't listen. Sometimes you just got to do it, and we've seen too many horses. The riders fight the horses, and they give up much sooner. And you look at Dramedy, who, by the way, 30-to-1 was an underlay when you look at his PPs. But this is a horse that, one way or another, dramatically improved going long. And you wonder if they can find a way to rein him in. Maybe he's one of these weird kind of horses that's going to got that uncontrolled speed, but he wants to go around a ground.
Well, he just gets a lot of air. He's got a big lung capacity. Who is that horse we talked about?
Precious Passion.
Precious Passion. Maybe he's a little bit like that.
Right. We don't want to say he's Precious Passion yet, who's obviously did a lot of things on the racetrack. But I was thinking the exact same thing, Richie. He could be that type of horse. And the other thing is, more than likely, going forward in these route races, nobody's going to want to run with this horse. So maybe he'll be able to do it by himself towards the front end, and maybe he'll be able to relax a little better if that's the case.
Without the gray horse in there, he's galloping alone on the lead by 3 or 4.
Right, and that's the whole thing,
yeah.
And maybe it's a different story. Interesting to see horses that aren't true that good going shorter get better when they go longer. Now, we want to go back to Sunday's races, and we'll go back to the Beaumont. I was still at Keeneland. Richie had come home to do the race report, his duty here at Aqueduct. I thought this was a really nice performance by Nis Ella for Graham Motion, who went up a big price. And she apparently is the workmate of the horse that had been the favorite the day before, Donworth, in the Lexington.
Wow, and you could just see how confident Rajiv Mirage here. He was taking a peek back. He waited until he really set her down as they were coming to the 8th pole. And Rajiv seems to have a way with the ladies. I mean, he always seems to pick up this nice filly and mare, especially down at Keeneland, Groupie Doll a few years ago.
Well, he certainly married well, which is sort of a shock if you know Rajiv and know how well he did in that department. So perhaps that's the case. Whatever the case is, Graham, and Graham, by the way, who came down to Keeneland, he finished second with Donworth, who put in a very good performance at Lexington. And I heard you and Jason talk about it last week and agree with everything you said. And he finished second in a race we're going to see in a second. So Graham went down there for some stakes with a win in 2 seconds. He had a heck of a good weekend at Keeneland.
Yeah, good weekend. Graham's horses always look good. Rajiv is finishing so well, too. I mean, I don't want to get away from Graham for a second, but we got the ISO here. Think about the injury he came back from last year. He's got plates in his arm. He never looks like he missed a day. And believe me, it takes a long time. When they put plates and screws in your body to get comfortable with it, he looks very comfortable.
Well, I really, and I know you agree, and Raj is a friend of ours, but you really hope that he gets back to the kind of form he was in, because Raj is an exceptional rider. And I think sometimes, in all fairness, he's been his own worst enemy, and not being at the top of the game. But he was riding tremendously before he got hurt last year, and he was really turning that corner. And it's, as you say, just going to take him a little while to get back in that groove, and hopefully he'll be back in that groove at Belmont.
I think it's a big step in the right direction right there.
Let's hope that's the case. Well, last year's runner-up for 2-year-old filly champion was Lady Eli. She got back in action in the Appalachian and met Sunset Glow, who actually finished second to her in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Lady Eli puts herself in the game. Maybe it was a bit of a workmanlike win, but she's back.
She's back, and she's just seriously good. I have a few questions about her. You know I'm a big fan, and I think she's brilliant. How far do you think she wants to go? And would it be out of line to think she couldn't compete over in Europe?
Well, I mean, that's obviously the question a lot of people are asking. And Sunset Glow is all in here, and Lady Eli just blows by her with relative ease. She's getting the rust off, lugged in a little bit there. Obviously, they're going to find out, because they're going to run her in the $1 million Belmont Oaks at Belmont at 1.25 miles. And you have to find out how far she wants to go. And who knows? I don't know either, Richie. The kind of move she has, you feel like sometimes it isn't as accentuated going longer.
Right. You would think maybe sometimes it might mute that thing. But I'm going to tell you, watch her head and her ears when she hits the front. She kind of really gets to looking around, and she's got some big ears. She kind of pricked her ears up there, and she looked around, lugged in a step. I think she just lost interest when she hit the front. I think if she has something in front of her that's capable of making her run faster, There's multiple gears there.
Chad Brown thinks this is maybe the best horse he's ever been around, and he also said she's the meanest horse he's ever been around, and that she is a tough horse to be around at times.
Well, it's interesting. It seems like a lot of the good ones have that personality. They don't want to be messed with, and they're very independent.
And when she gets on the racetrack, she runs her race. We'll see how far she wants to go. She's not going to go to Ascot, as a lot of people have mentioned. Perhaps that's something that could happen from that barn at some point in later time. The Transylvania was supposed to be a 13 or 14 horse field on opening day. It got rained out. They only got 5 to run it, unfortunately. And I'm going to tell you something. This is an exceptional ride by Javier Castellano to get the money with Nightcrawler.
You know, it's just like Groundhog Day when we talk about Javier and his rides, particularly on the grass. He just sits in the pocket, and obviously he's got live cover. You know Luck of the Kitten's a good horse. He's the favorite. He's going to carry you through. He's patient. He comes out. I just think that Javier is doing everything just the way Ramon Dominguez was a few years ago.
No, he's got confidence and a certain amount of calm here. And I'll tell you something, I never thought this horse was getting up and getting these 2 horses, and he gets there right in the nick of time.
Well, you know, it's interesting. When he came out, he really set him down. It almost looked like the horse lost a little momentum, trying to dig in too much, and Javier almost slowed things down. He regathered him up and then set him down again, where a lot of riders would have said, I'm running out of time, I got to keep going forward. He needed to rebalance his horse, get him back in the bridle so he could have something to lean on and get a little help, and that's what made him get up.
I guess that must be one of the hardest things as a rider, to know when you have to sort of tread that thin line between panicking a little bit and being patient.
And it's so hard to do. I mean, and that's where the confidence level shines through. I can't tell you how many times in my career, going back to look at things, I wish I would have said, wait, I need to give this horse a little more chance, get him back in the bridle, and that's exactly what he did there, and that's what made the difference.
It absolutely worked out. He's coming off those 2 Eclipse Awards, and you can see it all the time. Well, that does it for this week's action, but we're heading closer and closer to the Kentucky Derby. And next week, while we're looking forward to Wicked Strong running here in the Excelsior on Saturday, the focus of the attention, and Jason will be back, will be the Kentucky Derby. And you and Jason and I are going to go through a preview of the Kentucky Derby. We're not guaranteeing any picks yet. We want to wait until they draw the post for those races. But we want to get a nice review of the Kentucky Derby preps, and we'll be talking about it next weekend.
Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks to you for watching. Thanks to Richard Migliore. Good night.